The C5 and C6 Corvette are arguably the best bang for the buck track cars you can get today. Some of our Mustang friends might not agree with that, but I have a lot of personal experience with these cars. I owned a C5 Z06 that I tracked for several years, and my most recent track car was a C6 with a 403 stroker engine in it, and both awesome cars, extremely fast, extremely capable, all for a very reasonable price. So this market's one that we got into early in our big brake kit program, and we've ultimately produced a whole bunch of different options for these cars. So we have quite a wide menu of options to choose from, depending on how you plan to use your car, how fast it is, how fast you are, what tracks you're driving, or even if you want to drive it just mostly on the street. So a lot of options here. The goal with this guide is to show you really the differences between our kits to help you pick the one that's going to work out best for you in the long run. So hope you enjoy this. We're going to take these one at a time and then show the parts next to each other and really get into the details of how they're different so you can pick out the right one the first time. Okay, the first kit we're going to look at for the C5 and C6 Corvette is our CP9668 kit. This kit was the very first one we introduced for a Corvette. It was initially designed for SCCA T1 competition. The reason it's a 4-piston was guided by the rules, and we also were limited on the size of the disc we could use. So that's what this kit was originally designed for. It went on to win lots of championships in that class, lots of races. We've got these on a wide range of C5 and C6 Corvettes being run all over the world. So it's a great small kit, and I'm going to walk you through some of the details on it. The 8350 caliper is a 4-piston caliper, stainless steel pistons, anti-knockback springs. It takes a 20 millimeter thick pad, which is a very nice feature of it. So it's got great durability. And here is a shot of the stock pad for reference. But here's where the big difference is. If you look at the thickness difference, you can see how much thicker and how much pad volume there is with our brake kit versus the front stock setup. The discs aren't gigantic in this system, and in fact what most people are surprised to find out is that they're actually the same size as the stock discs in overall dimensions. So they're 325 millimeters in diameter by 32 millimeters thick. That's about where the similarities end with the stock equipment, however. These discs are far more durable than the stock setup. As you can see, they've got a very high internal vane count. So these have 70 internal vanes. They flow a lot of air. They shed a lot of heat, and they are far more efficient at moving air than the stock discs would be. So you're going to get a lot more durability out of these, even though they don't seem that large. These discs were originally designed for late model racing, asphalt late models, which are rather similar to curb weight and power as a Corvette. And those cars are forced to run a small 15-inch wheel. So we always have to cram in as much brake on those as we can to be durable enough. So it's a pretty heavy-duty disc, and it definitely punches above its weight versus many other discs on the market. So one of the beautiful things about this, despite the huge durability increase versus the stock equipment, our entire brake kit actually weighs 16 pounds less than the OEM front brake system. So you're shedding a lot of unsprung weight with this setup. It also has fantastic wheel clearance. It will clear OEM C5 Z06 front wheels, and a lot of people run the OEM C5 Z06 10.5-inch rear wheels on the front of their car, and this will clear those as well without any kind of spacer. We'll also clear a C6 Z06 wheel without any type of spacer. So offers really good wheel fitment. Also obviously fits a lot of aftermarket popular track wheels like an Apex wheel or a Forge Line, both brands which we sell. One of the driving forces behind this kit also is cost. This is a very economical system to run. Spare iron for this setup run at $249 retail each, and the pads, typical set of pads for this setup are about $200 a set. So very inexpensive, and long-term running costs are very low on this. The total package price is also very reasonable to get into one at $25.99. So cost is a great one, great feature of this kit. We also have a matching rear kit that looks almost identical. You probably know that the spindles are the same on the front mirror of the C5, C6 Corvette. So we have basically the same package, with the primary difference being the caliper itself. So if you were to hold up our front and rear calipers for these two kits, the front and rear of the car, the only real difference you would notice would be the piston sizing. So on the rear kit, we use smaller pistons to offer the proper brake bias on the car. And one of the great features about our four-wheel kit, the front and rear, is that you can keep less spares on hand. So if you have one set of brake pads and one set of spare discs, you could always take your front, after you wear them a bit, take the front pads out, put them on the rear, or the same with the discs after you've run some races on them or track events on them. Take the front iron, move it to the back, and then put some fresh on the front, and that's going to give you a really long wear cycle out of all the parts. So overall, extremely economical to run, but extremely effective as well. So this has been a fantastic kit for us. Again, won many races, and it will serve you well for a lot of different things. So who is this kit built for? This kit is for anyone looking for a lightweight, affordable package. It's great for autocross. You know, it saves 16 unsprung pounds versus the stock equipment off the nose of the car. Tremendous weight savings that you can't really find in other ways very easily. It's also good for road courses for lightly modified cars up to low to mid 400 horsepower range. Something like a C5 Z06, where you do an intake, exhaust, and tune, you're putting about 380 horsepower to the wheels. It's a very common setup that people run. You know, you can run it all day and it doesn't blow up on you. This is a great kit for that type of car. Once you get up into the mid 400 range, though, the thermal mass in this system is probably not going to be, it's not going to offer the durability that you're likely looking for. So that at that point, you're going to want to look at one of the larger kits we offer. And that's the whole thing. That's why we offer all of these options. So this one, though, is great. We did have some cars run them with, you know, 460 wheel horsepower early on before we had any larger kits, and they were fine. And we even had one car, it was a Mitsubishi Lancer Evo with 650 wheel horsepower, run almost the identical package with this caliper and our 325 millimeter disc in time attack. And while it got the job done, the thing was glowing orange and on the cusp of burning down the entire time, I'm pretty sure. So if you're going to go big power, you're going to want to look higher in the range. But for lightly modded cars in the C5s, C5 Z06, C6 base, Z51 Grand Sport, it's perfect. C6 Z06, most of our customers are going to be running starting around, stock cars, 430, 440 horsepower to the wheels. So they're sort of already on the cusp, and most people don't leave them stock. So any round of modifications, any added horsepower, light cams, things like that, is going to push you into a horsepower number where you're probably going to be better served with one of the larger kits. But again, it's a great lightweight, economical package that will serve you well for a very long time. And that's our fit for this particular kit. Okay, the big news when you move up to one of our larger Corvette kits, 355 millimeter discs or above, is the Radi-CAL caliper option. So these are quite a bit different than a conventional caliper that you've seen over many decades. And when the Radi-CAL concept was applied to calipers and they were released back in 2007, they really shook up the racing world. Since that time, the Radi-CAL has become the dominant caliper at the top levels of motorsports. We see them in NASCAR Cup, Formula One, you see them in racing all over the world, Super GT racing in Japan, DTM in Germany, Aussie V8 supercar, just everywhere the Radi-CAL has really become the standard. And the idea there with the Radi-CAL is an asymmetrical caliper design. So AP Racing looked at the dynamic forces acting on the caliper during an actual brake event, and then worked backwards to put the mass of the caliper where it was needed to resist those forces. So that's the underlying concept. And the result is a caliper that looks like a skeleton because there's no extra fat anywhere. It's only where the mass is structurally needed. That also leads to increased cooling because there's a lot more openings and voids and room for air to move around. I won't go into any more detail there, but we have a in-depth video that you can check out. If you click up here, it's called the AP Racing Radi-CAL story, and we also have a great blog post which has some interviews and magazine articles from Race Tech magazine, a few other places in there. So check that out for all the details. But when you move up to a 355mm kit or above, the Radi-CAL comes into play. Okay, the next step up the food chain are our 6-piston 355mm brake kits, and we've got two different options here. So the goal with these kits is to provide greater thermal capacity than our 4-piston 8350 325mm kits. And the way we do that is in both the brake pad and the brake disc. So what we'll do is give you a little shot of the brake pads, and I can show you the differences between them and how we get that greater thermal capacity. This one on the far side is the CP9350 pad, and this one is for the 9660 Radi-CAL, and this is for the 9668 Radi-CAL. So you can see here the footprint of the 4-piston caliper pad is much smaller than it is for the 6-piston calipers, and that's really the whole point of a 6-piston caliper. You can get the same brake torque out of a 4-piston that you can out of a 6-piston in most cases. It's just that you would do that by having 4 larger pistons rather than 6 smaller ones. The main reason you want to go to a 6-piston is for greater thermal capacity in the pad. So the footprint of the pad is larger than what you can get in a 4-piston. And then also, in this case, we've offered a couple thickness differences here. So you can really see a big difference in the overall volume if you're taking the length, the height, and the thickness into account. So the 8350 is a 20mm thick pad. The 9660 is an 18mm thick pad. And then over here, this is what the pad from the 9668, which is a full inch or 25mm thick. So tons of volume and wear capacity there and heat capacity in this pad. Now we're going to take a look at the discs and show you how we have greater thermal capacity in the discs themselves. The discs in the 6-piston kits are a 355 by 32mm 72 vane versus the 8350 kit, which was a 325 by 32 70mm or 70 vane disc, excuse me. So you can see, we'll give you an overhead shot of this to show you the difference in the disc size. It is a significant difference, and then you can stack them. Please excuse the marks on the discs. We have a rust inhibitor that we have to keep these coated in to prevent them from rusting. And then if you hold them up, you can see they're the same thickness. The vanes look a little more dense on the 325, obviously, because the overall diameter is a bit smaller. But the whole idea here is really to spread the heat over a larger surface area. Just like it was with the pads, you've got more surface area to spread the heat. So one of the things you'll notice if you're looking at the specs and trying to compare the kits is that the weight of these two discs is almost identical. The 355 and the 325 disc are nearly identical in weight, but the big difference is that the mass and the heat being absorbed by the disc is being spread over a larger area. So the disc is going to run cooler in the larger system. And it's the same with the pads. As you saw, the surface area of the pad was larger on the 6-piston kit, and that's going to spread that heat out a bit more. So in addition to having more volume and more of a heat sink to store the energy, it also spreads that heat out over a greater surface area and allows the system to cool more effectively. So, you know, some surprising things there for most people, because they think, wow, this one's going to weigh a lot more. But the reality is the entire kit with the 6-piston 355 weighs only slightly more than the CP8350 4-piston 325 kit. So with the 355 millimeter kits, we have two different caliper options. So we've got our CP9660 and our CP9668. Now the big difference between these two is the thickness of the pads, which I showed you, but also the overall width of the calipers. So if you look at these calipers side by side, you'll see that the CP9668 is considerably wider than the CP9660 to accommodate those thicker 25 millimeter pads. And where that's really going to factor in is on your wheel fitment. If you want to see more specifics on the differences between these calipers, we have a great blog article called Sibling Rivalry is all you need to search for on the blog, and it goes into great depth on which of these caliper options is most appropriate for you. But wheel fitment is what a lot of it boils down to, because the pads, although they are the same shape, they are in different thicknesses. Many times for pad manufacturers, the prices on the 25 millimeter thick option and the 18 millimeter thick option are almost the same. So you're getting about 40% more actual pad material for roughly the same cost. So if you can fit it inside your wheel and you can live with the, you know, half a pound weight penalty of the 9668, and you're not scraping for every 100th of a second, if you know, if you're doing HPDE, that sort of thing, it may be worth it if you can fit it into the wheels to go for the 9668. The cost difference isn't that much, and over time you'll make that up on pad savings. So I like to typically say, yeah, go for the 9668 if you can fit it in the wheels, because of the cost differences over the long haul, and also, you know, as long as you're not trying to save every 1/10 of a second. This one also comes with a quick change bridge, which can be handy if you're endurance racing. But again, wheel fitment's the big issue. The 9660 kit will fit inside on a C5 or C6. It will fit inside a C5 Z06 rear wheel when run on the front. It's very tight, but it does fit. It will also fit inside of a C6 Z06 wheel, the earlier wheels, the split 5-spoke up through 2008 without any kind of spacer. The 9660 will fit those wheels, whereas the 9668 kit will not. The newer C6 Z06 wheels, the spider wheels, will not clear either without a small spacer. But overall, the 9668 sticks out about 14 millimeters closer to the wheel spoke than the 9660. And again, I mentioned the weight difference. The 9668 weighs about half a pound more than the 9660, and the pads also weigh a little bit more too as well. So you do have a slight weight penalty with the 9668. But the bulk of the decision comes down to the wheels you're running and whether you can cram this one in there or whether you should stick to the 9660. The cost difference on these, again, is minimal between these two, but the cost difference of these kits over the 4-piston kits is significant. These start around $41.99, but you have to keep in mind also, though, everything is bigger. The pads are bigger, the discs are bigger, and they're going to last longer. So if you look over the entire timeline, you own the kit, it's not as black and white on the overall cost difference or the long-term cost of ownership, because you won't be swapping parts as frequently with these. You know, the pads you can leave in there without changing longer. The discs aren't going to need to be changed as frequently as they would on the smaller 4-piston kit. So when you're looking at these, think about that long-term, how much time you want to spend on servicing, that sort of thing, and that'll help you make your decision. So who are these kits for? We supply these kits to a lot of C6 Z06 owners that have light modifications or are limited in some way on their power output by a specific racing class. As I mentioned earlier, these kits save a lot of weight versus stock, somewhere in the 15 or so unsprung pound area. So they're really great for dropping unsprung weight. When you mate those up to a super lightweight wheel and tire package, they can become a big advantage over your competition. So, if you're pushing up to, mid to high 400 wheel horsepower range, we wouldn't expect any issues. You're not going to fade our 355 systems. They're going to hold up, have, good durability. I would have no concerns on those. We've got lots of people running them on cars of that sort, winning races, winning championships for the last several years. So perfect for that type of car. If you're gonna go monster horsepower, you've got a supercharger, or you're gonna do something else extreme, we do have larger kits, which I'm gonna show you some details on next. But that's pretty much the customer for these particular kits. Okay, the next step up would be our 372 millimeter competition systems. So the big difference here is the disc size. The calipers are the same as the 355 millimeter kits. The brackets are very similar for those calipers, the brake lines, the disc hats. Everything's essentially the same except designed to locate on the larger 372 millimeter discs. Now, just to be clear, you can't have a 372 millimeter system and then swap in a 355 millimeter disc if you want to at some point. We've had some of our clients ask that in the past. So everything's designed to locate the caliper at a specific location, and you can't interchange one size disc with another. It just doesn't work like that. So just to be clear about that point. But the goal with the 372 millimeter system is more thermal capacity. So the disc is also, in addition to being a larger diameter, it's also 2 millimeters thicker, and it has 84 internal vanes rather than 72. So we'll go to an overhead shot and we can show you the two discs side by side. Over here we have the 372 millimeter disc, and here is the 355 millimeter disc. And then also, if you look at them, you can see a bit of a difference in the internal vane structure. It's hard to tell really because of the diameter is larger, so they don't really, even though there are more vanes on the larger discs, it doesn't appear that different because they're arrayed around a bigger diameter disc. But you can see they both have a nice wide air gap. They flow tons of air. They have the same mounting system. This one has a slightly different J-hook face pattern, just to spread the heat out in a slightly different way, but essentially the same concept. So some differences there on the disc. Now, one of the differences is that thermal mass adds some weight. So this disc is about 4 to 5 pounds heavier than this disc. So some of our wheel-to-wheel racing customers prefer the 355 because they're really most concerned about that extra unsprung weight savings, and every 100th of a second counts. Now, someone who's doing HPDE and they want to have longevity and durability out of their discs, they're not afraid to have those extra few pounds in there. So, and they won't have to swap the disc out as frequently. They're going to absorb and dissipate heat and last a bit longer. So some differences there on the discs. As far as weight goes, the one thing that's really cool is that even if you do decide to go to the larger 372 millimeter disc, you're still going to save a lot of weight versus the much smaller brake system from the manufacturer. So this 372 setup saves about 10 pounds versus an OEM base C5 or C6 brake setup, and it saves 13 unsprung pounds off the nose compared to a C6 Z06 setup, which is quite a bit smaller. So even if you do go with a heavier setup, you're still going to be saving a lot of unsprung weight versus stock, which is awesome. And again, wheel fitment comes into play. What a lot of people don't realize is that the wheel fitment on the 372 millimeter discs can actually sometimes be superior to that of our 355 millimeter kits. And the reason for that is as you go out closer to the barrel of the wheel and you're locating the caliper further out towards the barrel of the wheel, the spokes typically curve outwards. So as you get further out from the hub, you actually have more spoke clearance in a lot of cases. So it's best to always just check the wheel fitment templates, but in a lot of cases we find that wheel fitment with the 372 millimeter disc is actually better than it is with the smaller 355 millimeter disc, which is pretty counterintuitive for most people. When we designed the 372 system, we sort of started with a clean slate. Everyone else was doing 380 millimeter systems, which are really hard to cram into an 18-inch wheel in most cases. So we almost went down that path and we said, wait a second, hold on here. Let's really think about this. What's the goal here? We need to fit it inside an 18 because that's what most Corvette owners, C6 and C5 owners are running. So we went to a clean slate and basically designed the biggest, baddest disc we could cram inside an 18-inch wheel, and then took it from there. So that's how we ended up with this disc design. In terms of calipers, you still have the same caliper options that you had with the 355 millimeter kits. You have your 9668 and your 9660. And the decision between these two, again, comes down to mostly pad thickness and wheel fitment. So you have to figure out, do you want the little added weight penalty to 9668, or would you rather have the durability, added thickness, and will they clear your wheels? So that's the main decision on these two kits. So who are our 372 millimeter kits for? Basically, our 372 millimeter kits are for anyone who's building the fastest C6 or C5 they can build. We've had our 372 millimeter system win championships in NASA, SECCA. We're winning races in Trans Am, SGT class. Huge power, aero, slicks. These discs will take a serious beating and keep coming back for more. So basically, once you get up over 500 wheel horsepower or running a very tough braking track, you're going to Watkins Glen all the time, that's your home track, or Sebring or Road America, the added mass of the 372 millimeter discs really comes in handy. They're going to last a long time and take everything you can throw at them. So again, they're still considerably lighter than the OEM brakes by anywhere from 10 to 13 unsprung pounds off the nose of the car. So no weight penalty. You've got a huge unsprung weight savings, huge thermal capacity increase. You've got tons of pad options. So 372 kits really for the hardcore, big power. We've had them on cars up to, on C6s, ZR1s with 700 horsepower, 800 horsepower, no problem, handles it fine. I had a C6 with a 403 stroker, I think I mentioned that before, and I ran the 372 9668 system on my car. I was pounding them at VIR and did it a couple events, and I checked my pad wear and I had barely worn the pads. So they will hold up great for no matter what you throw at them. Okay, now we're going to take a look at our rear kit, our rear Radi-CAL kit for the C5 and C6. We only have one option for the rear, and it has proven virtually indestructible for anyone with a C5 or C6. I don't know of anyone that's had any problems with fade, wear, cracking discs, anything of that sort. It doesn't use a gigantic disc, but it has proven to be plenty large for anything anyone can throw at it, and that's at all levels of everything from driver's ed all the way up to Trans Am, wheel-to-wheel, 40-minute races, that sort of thing. So it's a 340 by 28 millimeter disc, 60 internal vanes, has great cooling, great thermal capacity, mated to a 4-piston Radi-CAL. We use a couple different versions of this depending on the car, but typically a CP9668 would be the part number on this one. Extremely lightweight package, great pad availability for that one. And it also, the great thing about this one, it maintains full parking brake functionality. So if you need a rear kit to match your front Radi-CAL kit, regardless of whether it's a 355 or a 372, this is the kit. Bolts right on and works great in every regard. Do you need a rear brake kit? This is a question we get a lot of times. And with the C5 and C6 Corvette, the front brakes take a tremendous amount of abuse relative to what the rears take. And that's why you don't need a gigantic rear brake setup on it. Anything bigger than this 340 is really overkill. It's just dead weight you're dragging around back there. If you're looking to shave weight and, you know, every 1/10 of a second. The thing I always tell people is you are much better if you're budget limited to get the absolute best front brake kit you can afford for your C5 or C6 rather than trying to spread that money across the front and rear of the car. So invest it in the front, and that's where you're going to get the greatest ROI on that money spent. So let's say you had $5,000 and you know you're looking at competing brake offerings, and you asked me and you said, okay, I have $5,000. Here's the specs on the car. You know, it's 480 wheel horsepower, and you know all the other things it has on it. Are you better off getting a, you know, a lesser front and rear brake kit for both ends of the car with that $5,000, or are you better getting a really good front brake kit? The latter is definitely the way you want to go. Most of our customers, and I've seen this on my own cars, you're going to get 3 or 4 front pad and disc changes before you ever have to touch the rear. The fronts just take so much more abuse. So the biggest bang for the buck and your biggest return on investment is going to come on the front of the car. So I consider the rear a really nice to have, but not a need. So if you're budget limited and you know you don't want to get both, and some of our customers, even what they'll do is they'll buy the front and wait until the rears wear out completely and then swap to our rear kit and sort of spread the purchase out. So, you know, you'll get the front at one point and that way you aren't taking the big hit on your wallet all at one time. But you're much better off focusing on the front. And then in the rear, in the interim, what you do is you just get some nice race pads, maybe some Spiegler stainless steel brake lines. As long as you have good fluid, the rear's gonna be okay. You aren't gonna run into any severe brake problems unless you're, you know, running with the nannies on, your yaw control is activating the rear constantly, something like that. You maybe overheat the rear, but otherwise you're not gonna have many huge problems in the rear. So again, focus on the front. If you're budget limited, always get the absolute best front kit you can afford, and that's gonna pay you dividends over your years of ownership. Okay, so our last kit option is a little different versus what we've looked at so far. And it's a completely different category, what we call our road kits. So we have a little a graph and a description of these kits. We're going to be shooting a video with all the detailed differences between our competition kits, but I'm going to give you a brief overview now. The road kits are really designed for someone who wants to mainly have it for the street. They hate that their, you know, stock brakes are so tiny or they are ineffective. They want something that fills their wheels up. They want something that looks amazing, but they also want something that performs well. And that's really, I think, where our road kits can be separated from a lot of the competition. We offer all those things. And so it's not just about, you know, it's not just about being red and large. These things are legitimately capable to taking some serious abuse. The caliper is a 6-piston caliper, but whereas our competition calipers don't have any dust boots and they have a stainless steel ventilated piston with knockback springs, the road kit has an aluminum piston, and it does have the dust boots. So if you're gonna run in any kind of inclement weather, that sort of thing, this would be a superior solution for you. Also, these come in red, black, and silver paint, whereas our competition kits only come in a competition finish like the anodized gray. One of the interesting things about these systems is they use a massive pad. So the pad, I'll show you the difference between, this is the pad for the road kit, and this is the pad for the OEM base C6 or C5 caliper. So you can see a tremendous difference in size there. You know, it's a huge increase. Thickness is pretty similar between the two, but you've just got so much more pad material there. So our road kit will absorb and dissipate heat a lot better than the OEM pads will. If you take a look at the disc is a beast. This is a 380 by 36 disc. So this thing will fill up a 19-inch wheel beautifully. It's 72 vane, and it is a fully floating disc. It has our J-hook pattern on it. Looks incredible behind a nice set of wheels. And again, this thing has some serious thermal capacity versus any stock disc on any C5 or C6 Corvette. So they will take some serious abuse. They do not offer the weight savings of the competition kits. So that's one thing to note. And then wheel fitment is going to be a little tougher with these than it will be with the competition system. So again, we have the front system, and then we actually have a matching rear system with a 4-piston caliper, and it also has a 380 disc, except it's a 28 thickness. So we can set you up with a full 4-wheel road kit if that's more what you're after for your car. So again, lots of options regardless of how you're using your car, where you're using your car, or what you're going to be doing with it. Okay, well, hopefully that guide gives you some assistance in choosing the brake kit that is right for you and most closely meets your needs. We have a lot of resources available if you want to dig deeper into the technology specifically of each kit. You can look at the website. Our other videos on our YouTube channel, like the Competition Brake Kit Part 1 and Part 2, would be a great resource just to see the little details and what advantages our systems have over some of our competition or your stock equipment. And then finally, if you need assistance, we have a sales team that's here every week, Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. They're available by phone. You can chat, email. Contact them and talk with them about your specific situation, and they'll be able to guide you to the product that is most closely fits your needs.